Hi everyone, we wanted to take you along the journey of what it takes to build an esports organisation and generally the revenue models that you would want to consider to do and that Endpoint are considering or already have kind of invested in ourselves. So we've got the 10 best revenue models we think for esports, and we'll start from number 10 and we'll go all the way down to number 1, which we think is the best model. Have a think what you think it's going to be. Might be different. So we'll start with Adam, number 10.
So number 10 is kind of like consultancy within esports. There's a lot of companies, brands, even education facilities like universities, colleges, etc., that are all looking to kind of be educated on what esports is and like have that awareness in a way. And there's a lot more being said about it in the press. The Olympic Committee getting involved, the Commonwealth, etc. So there is kind of a space there to, I guess, exert your knowledge of esports onto somebody else. I'll be honest, it's not a huge revenue stream. It's not something that we've taken full advantage of. We've done a few things, I guess, with brands. So we've done talks with Flutter, for example, kind of educating them on esports and what it is. We have done some education ones with colleges and universities. Being completely honest, it's quite difficult to get money out of because I guess in some ways there are people that specialize in that. So they'll go out there and kind of do it on a brand perspective, but it is always an option.
And I think it will be something for the future as even more football clubs get involved or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And number 9 for us is merchandise. Again, if you're a massive organisation, it could be a much higher on the list, but for Endpoint, we feel like it's number 9. Merchandise is always something which you dream of getting really great revenues from and selling loads of jerseys and hoodies and everything. And actually, the reality of it is it's quite hard to do. And you put a lot of time and resources into building great products for merchandise, great jersey designs, all these other things. But the revenues models are quite small for them, and it's not something we have a huge focus on. That being said, stuff like jerseys are super important because you need to have that brand exposure. Brands don't like you just slapping a logo on a jersey, but at the same time, it's part of that partnership. Yeah. That's why jerseys for us are important, even if they're at a loss. They're important because we can put CEX's logo on it, we can put any other brands on it as well.
And we've kind of tried to tackle it in 2 ways as well. So we've got a really good local partner for jerseys that we kind of know what their cut is. We know that we can go and pick up our stock from them and things like that. But in terms of like casual merch, we've done like drop shipping for the last 2 years really. It kind of started because of COVID and the fact that we didn't have anywhere to store products, but actually it kind of just worked out where it's printed on demand. We get the markup on that product and they handle all of the shipping and everything for us. So that's kind of been the way.
Staff time, isn't it? Staff time is the hard part of it. But that being said, I think it's important as well because fans want your merch to be able to show it around, and it's always advertising in itself if you have people walking around with your products.
So the next one on the list, number 8, subscription revenue or recurring revenue. It's something that we got once we acquired the UKIC because the Faceit platform has subscriptions on there. We got a revenue share from those subscriptions, but it's also something that we're looking to take advantage of more once we launch our SaaS product. But it's kind of a really good way, to generate ongoing income alongside things like sponsorship, etc. This could be down to like a Patreon for exclusive content or other things that Pete will mention later, but anything that is kind of subscription based, whether it's for extra content or product or a service, is generally a really good thing to do. Kind of takes time to get it off the ground.
It can be really hard to do in esports, but it's actually something that investors really want to see as well. Investors want to see an ARR, it's called, like an annual recurring revenue that you can prove is recurring. And that is what we hope our SaaS product that is coming soon will be as well for us as a company. But
and I think it's one of the hardest, one of the hardest things to kind of do within esports because, unlike traditional esports where they've got people coming through the gate at their ground every other week and things like that, and that model really isn't there for esports. But if you put a bit of work into it and try and figure it out, it can be really lucrative.
Agree, yeah. I think Fnatic are doing something great with that actually right now as well, with their program. Number 7 for us moves on to tournament revenue. So over the years, we have got bits and bobs of tournament revenue. You might qualify for a big event like Blast, or CCT did some at some points, where you would do tournament broadcast rights almost, and as an org, if you qualified for it, you got a nice whack sum of money for that. Right now, I think esports they do it more within the franchise model, but I think that is coming to the open model. And I think right now, broadcast revenues or tournament revenues are not that high, but I see that being a big player in the next 5 years to come, where more broadcast rights become a thing, more tournament organisers, when you qualify for a major event, will have to do it, especially in the likes of Counter-Strike. Look, Counter-Strike have banned franchising. And I know for a fact they are in the future, when you qualify for their major events, they're going to have to replace that revenue somehow to the teams that are attending there and broadcast rights and everything. So I see number 7 being one for the future, but it is there right now still.
And again, that's kind of another one that you can learn from traditional sports. Traditional sports like football have that media right like payment for leagues like Premier League famously is a big payer, but even like championship level clubs and so on. So yeah, I agree completely.
But I'd also add that Tier 1 right now has it, Tier 2 doesn't quite have it yet. So it's gonna whittle its way down into the general ecosystem, I think, better.
So number 6 is skin revenue. So some publishers do a really good job of kind of sharing revenue and publishing items into the game that represent teams and organizations and sharing the revenue that they deliver with their partners. It's something that we have in Rocket League, where we've sold over 300,000 cars with the Endpoint logo on. It also works in 2 ways as well, in the fact that we have a sponsor logo on that car, so that's another asset effectively that you can sell to sponsors. Obviously the big ticket item for us is Counter-Strike. Like, we would love to make a Counter-Strike major and have stickers in there, because they, again, are really lucrative. And it's something that I think will happen more and more, and I think teams are kind of wising up to the fact that there has to be some incentive in there from publishers be a part of that game, and digital revenue is kind of an obvious one to do that.
It's the first thing we look for when if we're looking at going into a game. Does the publisher support digital revenue? Because I think it is the future as well. So
yeah, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of microtransactions, and like each skin is quite cheap, but when you build it up into the player base, it can be a large sum of money.
And it's also a fan can then have something in game it's another way of like fan kind of engagement. You can call it representation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Number 5, we have fan tokens. So we as Endpoint have been on socios for a while, and has been a decent kind of way of us engaging with fans as an asset and kind of doing activations with fans and a way of monetizing that at the same time. So how do we do that and actually be able to put budget towards fan engagement? And it kind of helps us bring that in with something like fan tokens. I think again, fan tokens is something for the future which really could be a massive thing. Right now it's growing, and I think it's got a long way to go still, but I like the concept of it. I think the concept of it is great, and I think that's kind of the way that esports or even the sporting world can utilize crypto and other places like that.
And it's not just fan tokens, it's kind of like any fan engagement loyalty program.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be crypto based in a way. Find a way in which kind of fans can interact with you, and you get some kind of revenue from that at the same time.
It kind of ties in with the subscription model, which we were talking about earlier with like Patreon could be the same thing.
Yeah.
Or any way of doing it, but just having a platform to do that with. Yeah.
So number 4, which is a more obvious one, I guess, in esports, is prize money. Prize money varies based on game, level of competition, etc. I actually think the biggest check we've ever got from prize money is maybe Battalion, or a smaller game, but
I think we did have one Counter-Strike, which was about the same, but yeah.
Yeah. And obviously that's a key revenue driver. I guess the one thing to mention is obviously within esports, unlike traditional sports, there's kind of this hangover from grassroots of esports where players still get the biggest chunk of prize money. So where you might get a 100k check, typically the majority of that would go to the players and the org will take a smaller cut. I think that's something that will stabilize with increases in player salaries and things like that, where players are guaranteed an income. I think prize money is kind of one of those things that will have to budge as more traditional sports owners and things like that come into the scene, because we've spoken to football clubs about esports, and that's one of the things where they kind of just cough. They kind of just laugh at us in a way and just can't really believe that that's the case. But so I do think it will stabilize, but it's still a big revenue driver. Though, particularly in Counter-Strike, there are so many events to compete for, and yes, they might be 10k, 20k, but if you can get a couple of those under your belt, then you're on a good track.
Yeah, I agree. So number 3 is like football or any other thing. It's kind of a buying and selling market, trading players. We have done that really well over the years. We have been a great path to pro kind of business, and we've reinvested the profits we've made from that. But we've sold 10 players over the last year in mostly Counter-Strike, but also Rocket League, and kind of making that path to pro model work, which can be a really good way to bootstrap a company up to the top, being honest. If you've got all the big investment at the start, you don't have to sell players, or you can wait for that bigger check size, you could say. But it is a good revenue model, and buying and selling players is another thing when you look into games that you want to go into. Is there even a buy and sell market there? Does the year-long structure work well with buying and selling players? players does it not?
Because it's like Rocket League, for example, isn't typically we've been lucky. We sold a player.
Sell one player.
Yeah, but it's not typically a buying and selling market.
Yeah.
Unlike Counter-Strike, which is and then the other thing with buying and selling is identifying talent and making sure, like especially if you're starting from grassroots, identifying talent and nurturing them to the point where you kind of got to be honest with yourself. You know, at the end of the day, if you're a smaller organization and you've got this young talent and you nurture them and put them in the shop window, so to speak, it can be really lucrative. So it's just about being fair as well in contracts and what have you, and knowing that at some point a bigger team might come in for that player. Yes, the cards are in your hand a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want to shut down the player's progression. And I feel like over the years we've been pretty fair. Kind of got a good reputation with agents, with players, and things for that. So
and bigger orgs that want to they understand getting a player from Endpoint means they've been nurtured well and they speak English well, or they
exactly. So the next one on the list, number 2, is the biggest one for us right now, is sponsorship. So sponsorship is kind of prevalent within esports. Obviously, more and more brands are looking to get in the space, and the obvious way for them to do that and engage with our audience is through brand activations or sponsorships and things like that. Again, it's something that kind of comes and goes. Like we've seen this market this year has been quite difficult. We lost a few sponsors last year that we haven't really recouped. But if you get some really good partnerships in there, they can be very good. I mean, the partnership that we have with CEX has been invaluable to us, not only because of that sponsorship revenue, but because of the fact that it is a partnership and we work closely with them and they help us deliver kind of key business objectives. But yes, sponsorships is a big driver, but I guess I caveat that with like, don't be too reliant on it. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket and think, well, if I can sell my front of jersey this year, then I can sign all these players, do whatever I want, because it's kind of like they could not re-sign next year and pull the plug. And I guess that leads It
leads nicely on to number 1, which you might think we're cheating. We're putting number 1, which isn't our current biggest revenue source, but I think it's a must for the future. And I think it's around like, how does esports monetize and be sustainable? And it has to be around being sustainable around it. Like esports has a great thing. One of the things that's really got going for esports is the eyeballs on esports is amazing. Everyone says it. There's loads of eyeballs in esports. How do you monetize that? If you believe in your product being a sponsor, like you have a partner coming on board who sponsors you, if you actually believe in that product, why not create businesses yourself, which you can grow? You don't have that middle ground. You use case studies for other businesses as well. The number 1 for us has got to be other businesses. It's got to be having a sustainable model around it. So Endpoint has got UKIC, but that's also kind of sponsorships. But then you've got Pracrooms and you've got our new SaaS product coming as well. So you've got 2 businesses which I'm hoping will massively benefit from esports and show revenue, a diverse revenue stream. Bringing that sponsorships, not having less sponsorship money coming in, but bringing that sponsorship money, which is currently around the 50-60% of our revenue, down to like 25%. Being higher, but less reliant on. And if you lose a partnership, it can't kick you in the teeth as hard as it can right now because you're not as reliant on it.
And I think that's the thing. The esports organization part of our business is definitely the riskiest. There's no denying it. You know, so if you're wanting to get into esports as an organization, there is an element of risk there. We bootstrapped this company for 3 years, putting in money every month until we managed to get enough sponsorship revenue to cover that business. Like that's the reality, right? Like it may just come and go. So I think you can stay in the world of esports, you know, offer services in it, whether it's tournaments, whether it's community, whether it's organization, or like we've got a studio here that we use and we put on events and things like that. And it's kind of offering services to brands that want to come into it. Again, a lot of brands maybe have had their fingers burnt by sponsoring teams and they might just want an event that they can own. If you can offer that service to them and not lose that kind of potential partnership, then it's a win-win.
Thanks for listening. We're doing a group of videos to kind of give you a bigger insight into what Endpoint is or esports is, part of our larger investment round, but we're just hoping to give you guys that journey and show you along what me and Adam do day to day, but and maybe it's insightful to some people who are looking to get into the sector or who are already in the sector, and maybe that's some free consultancy for you there.